Right. So here you see this right atrium. So again in this diagram, what is this one? This is the right atrium. This is the right atrium. This is the right ventricle, and this is the left ventricle. This is the apex of the heart, and here this is the left atrium. So the right atrium, see here, this right atrium, what are the external features of right atrium? So the external features, you see here, the right atrium, the upper end is prolonged to form the right auricle. The upper end of the right atrium is prolonged anteriorly to form the right auricle. And this right atrium forms a part of which surface? Sternocostal surface. Part of sternocostal surface. Yesterday we have studied the sternocostal surface is formed by the right atrium, the right ventricle, and the left ventricle. So the right atrium will form a part of sternocostal surface, and also the right atrium will form the part of base of the heart. So I told you the base of the heart, 2/3 of the base of the heart is formed from the left atrium, and 1/3 is formed from the right atrium. 2/3 is formed from the left atrium, and the 1/3 is formed from the right atrium. And also the right atrium forms the right border of the heart. The right atrium forms the right border of the heart. And there is a sulcus. What is the sulcus? Right anterior atrioventricular sulcus or the coronary sulcus. So where is the sulcus? Atrioventricular sulcus or the coronary sulcus on the right side. So this divides the right atrium from the right ventricle. So this right atrioventricular sulcus, you can see this artery. What is this artery? This artery is the right coronary artery. What is this artery? Right coronary artery. So along with this right coronary artery, what is present? The small cardiac vein. So the right atrium is separated from the right ventricle by the atrioventricular sulcus or the coronary sulcus, and within this coronary sulcus, what is lodged? The right coronary artery along with the small cardiac vein. So shall review about this right atrium. What are the things we are still what I have taught you? I told you that the right atrium is forming the part of sternocostal surface, and the right atrium forms the right border of the heart, and between the right atrium and the right ventricle there is a right coronary sulcus, in which the right coronary artery, coronary sulcus, in which the right coronary artery along the small cardiac vein is present, and the right atrium also forms the 1/3 of the base of the heart. So this is about the external features of the right atrium. External features of the right atrium, and this right atrium is prolonged. Yesterday someone has asked, is auricle and atrium is present? Is same? No, auricle is different and the atrium is different. So auricle means it is a prolongation of the atrium. So this the right atrium is prolonged anteriorly to form the right auricle. Right. So this is about what? This is about the external features of the right atrium. So this external features of the right atrium. So this carries 5 marks. This carries 5 marks. Then coming to the here, if you draw a line from the superior vena cava joining the inferior vena cava, there is a groove, vertical groove, and that vertical groove which is formed by joining the superior vena cava with that of the inferior vena cava is called as sulcus terminalis. Sulcus terminalis. And how is this sulcus terminalis produced? The sulcus terminalis is produced by the underlying crista terminalis. So here, what is this thing here? This is what we did tell you, the external features of the heart. If you draw a margin or a line from the superior vena cava to the inferior vena cava, there is a sulcus, and that sulcus is called as the sulcus terminalis. and the upper end of the sulcus terminalis, there is what? There is an SA node. Where is the SA node present? At the upper end of the sulcus terminalis. Upper end of the sulcus terminalis consists of SA node. Right? So this is about the external sulcus terminalis. Also is described in the external features of the heart. And how this sulcus terminalis is produced? It is produced by the crista terminalis. It is produced by this crista terminalis. Right? So this is about the external features of the right atrium. Then coming to the openings of the right atrium. So if you see this diagram, so what is this diagram? This is the superior venae cava, and this is the inferior venae cava, superior venae cava, inferior venae cava, and you can see this is the auricle, right auricle, and what is this one here? This is the atrioventricular orifice or AV, and which is guarded by the three cusps, that is the tricuspid valves. They are guarded by the tricuspid valves, right? And here you see the openings of the coronary sinus, and the opening of the inferior venae cava, opening of the superior venae cava, right? So now next point is what we have learned about the sulcus terminalis. At the upper end, we have said that the SA node is present, and also we have learned that now we are going to learn about the inlets of the right atrium. So what are the openings of the right atrium? What are the veins which are opening into the right atrium? The first and foremost is the superior venae cava, which is getting its blood from the head and neck region. And the second one is the inferior venae cava, opening into the right atrium. And the third one is the coronary sinus. Yesterday someone was asking, what is this coronary sinus? So this is also the venous. When you study the venous circulation of the heart, you learn all the veins, the great cardiac vein, the middle cardiac vein, and the small cardiac vein. All these will drain into the coronary sinus. Where is this coronary sinus present? Yesterday I told you the coronary sinus is present near the crux of the heart. What do you mean by crux of the heart? The crux of the heart is where interatrial sulcus and interventricular sulcus and the atrioventricular sulcus meet, is called as the crux of the heart, and there the coronary sinus is present. And this coronary sinus also finally drains into the right atrium. So the opening. So first we should write about the external features of the right atrium, and then next you have to write about the openings of the right atrium, the opening of the superior venae cava, the opening of the inferior venae cava, the opening of the coronary sinus, the opening of the anterior cardiac veins. So the anterior cardiac veins also drains into the other parts of the ventricles, also other parts of the other chambers of the heart. It is the left atrium, the right ventricle, and the left ventricle, and along with that vena cava minimi. All this will open into the right atrium. So next is what? The next topic is you have to know about the inlets of the right atrium. So the first thing is the external features of the right atrium, right? Then coming to the outlet of the right atrioventricular orifice. So the blood is coming, from the coming into the right atrium. So through where? Through all these inlets. What is this inlet? Superior venae cava, inferior venae cava, and what is this one? The opening of the what is this one? The coronary sinus, and also from the venae cava minimi and the anterior cardiac veins. And from the right atrium, how does the blood enter into the right ventricle? So it is entering through the right atrioventricular orifice. What is this? How is it entering? It is entering through the right atrioventricular orifice. And this right atrioventricular orifice, you can see here, is guarded by the three valves. And these valves are called as tricuspid valves. So the right atrioventricular orifice is present between the right atrium and the right ventricle. And this right atrioventricular orifice is guarded by the three valves. And what are those valves called as? That are called as tricuspid valves. That are called as what? tricuspid valves. Right? So now you know the inlets and the outlet of the right atrium. Now we have to study about the interior of the right atrium. So interior of the right atrium. So you see here how the right atrium has been cut. They have cut along the sulcus terminalis. Along the sulcus terminalis. So from the cut has been given from the superior vena cava to the inferior vena cava. That is along the sulcus terminalis, and also they are cut along the upper part of the, what is this one? This is the auricle of the right atrium. So once the right atrium is cut, what are the things you are going to see? You have an anterior rough part, posterior smooth part, and the septum. What is that septum called as? Interatrial septum. So in the anterior rough part, you can see below the sulcus terminalis. I told you the sulcus terminalis is produced by what? By the underlying crista terminalis. So the sulcus terminalis is produced by the underlying crista terminalis. And from the crista terminalis, you can see the comb-shaped structures which are coming. And these comb-shaped structures are called as musculi pectinate. So two things in the anterior rough part you have to learn. One is the crista terminalis, which is producing the sulcus terminalis on the external feature. And from the crista terminalis, you can see the comb-shaped structures which are emerging out. And this anterior rough part these are called as what? Musculi pectinate. And this musculi pectinate are also extending into where? Into the auricle. Right? So you can see the musculi pectinate here. Right? So these are the two things. And one more thing you should remember is development of the anterior rough part of the right atrium. So the anterior, so you just write it down and just remember for today, because embryology classes are not over for you. You just remember that the anterior rough part is developed from the primitive atrium. I cannot speak more than this for today. Right? So you just remember that the anterior rough part of the right atrium is developed from the primitive atrium. Is developed from where? Primitive atrium. Then coming to the posterior smooth part. So the posterior smooth part, you see here, the posterior smooth, all the openings are coming into the this one. The superior vena cava is opening into the posterior smooth part, and the inferior vena cava is opening into the smooth part of the right atrium. And you can see this inferior vena cava is guarded by a valve. This valve, which is guarding the opening of the inferior vena cava, is called as eustachian valve. Is called as what? Eustachian valve. The valve which is guarding the opening of the inferior vena cava is called as eustachian valve. And also you can see here in the posterior smooth part, what is this one? The opening of the coronary sinus. Opening of the coronary sinus. I told you, where do you come across this coronary sinus? The coronary sinus is the one where into which the cardiac veins, that is the right cardiac, great cardiac vein, small cardiac vein, middle cardiac vein, oblique cardiac, all these veins will be draining into the coronary sinus. And where is this coronary sinus present? It is present near the crux of the heart. And where does this coronary sinus open? This coronary sinus opens into this right atrium, and this coronary sinus is guarded by a valve, and that valve is called as Thebesian valve. That valve is called as Thebesian valve. Right? So the superior vena cava opening, the inferior vena cava opening, and also what is this one? The opening of the coronary sinus. And there are other openings, that is the anterior cardiac vein and the vena cava pediments, which are also into the right atrium. Right? And you can see here, what is this one? This is the atrioventricular orifice. And this atrioventricular orifice is what? It is between the right atrium and the right ventricle, and it is guarded by valves. How many valves? 3 valves, and that is why, since it is guarded by 3 valves, it is called as tricuspid valve. It is called as tricuspid valve. So this is all about what? This is all about the posterior smooth part of the right atrium. So we have studied about the anterior rough part, about the crista terminalis, and about the muscula pectinata. And the posterior, and this is developed from the primitive atrium. The posterior smooth part, you just remember, it is developed from the sinus venerium. S-I-N-U-S, sinus venerium. V-E-N-E-R-A-U-M. Sinus venerium. First time being, you remember, until your embryology classes are taught to it. Right. So the posterior smooth part of the right atrium is developed from where? From the sinus venerium. So we have spoken about the interior of the right atrium, about the anterior rough part of the right atrium, and the posterior smooth part of the right atrium, and also we have spoken about the openings into the posterior smooth part of the right atrium. Now only one thing is left, that is the septal valve. That is what? Septal valve. So the septal valve, this is the septal valve, and here in between the right atrium and the left atrium, you find what is this called as fossa ovalis. What is this called as? Fossa ovalis. Fossa ovalis. Right? So between the right atrium and the septum means where? Septum, where is it present? It is present between the right atrium and the left atrium. Between the right atrium and the left atrium. And this, in between the right atrium and the left atrium, you find what is this called as fossa ovalis. Fossa ovalis. And this fossa ovalis develops from where? Develops from the septum primum. You have to remember this even. What is this? It is from where does it develop? It is developing from the septum primum. Septum primum. So this also I told you 2 points till now. The anterior rough part or the pectinate part develops from the primitive atrium. The first point. And the second point, the posterior smooth part develops from the sinus venerium. And the third point is what? The septal wall. The septal wall, where is it? What do you find in the septal wall? What is this one? The fossa ovalis. So this fossa ovalis develops from where? Septum primum. The third point. And the fourth point, the margin above the fossa ovalis is called as what? Limbus fossa ovalis. The margin above the fossa ovalis is called as limbus fossa ovalis. And this limbus fossa ovalis develops from the lower part of the septum secundum. It develops from where? From the lower part of the septum secundum. So 4 points regarding the development of the right atrium you should note down. The first point is the anterior rough part develops from the primitive atrium. The posterior smooth part develops from sinus venerium, and the fossa ovalis develops from septum primum, and the limbus fossa ovalis develops from septum secundum, lower part of the septum secundum. So this is all about the septal wall. This is all about the septal wall. Right. So now there are 2 more points to be learnt in the right atrium. Usually most of the books give until this, but some books have given as what is the other point called as torus aorticus. What do you mean by the torus aorticus which is present in the right atrium? So what is this torus aorticus? Before going to this torus aorticus, if you see here, what is this one? This is the right coronary artery. What is this one? Right coronary artery. And what is this one? This is the left coronary artery. So the right coronary artery and the left coronary artery are arising from where? From the ascending aorta. Ascending aorta. So here there are three aortic sinuses. Three aortic sinuses. One is the right anterior aortic sinus, and the second one is the left posterior aortic sinus, and the third one is the right posterior aortic sinus, which is not seen here. So how many are there? How many aortic sinuses are there which are arising from the ascending aorta? The right anterior aortic sinus, and the second one is left posterior aortic sinus, and the right posterior aortic sinus. So from the right anterior aortic sinus, the right coronary artery develops. From where does the right where is the origin of right coronary artery? From the right anterior aortic sinus. And from the left posterior aortic sinus, the left coronary artery origins. And I told you the third one is there. Three are there. Which is the third one? The left posterior aortic sinus. So this left posterior aortic sinus is where no artery arises, and this left posterior aortic sinus will form the torus aorticus. Will form the torus aorticus, or the elevation which is produced by the left posterior aortic sinus or non-coronary sinus is called as the right posterior aortic sinus is called as torus aorticus. Again I am repeating it. I told you there are three aortic sinuses. One is the right anterior aortic sinus, from which the right coronary artery develops. The second one is the left posterior aortic sinus, from which the left coronary artery develops. And the third one is the right posterior aortic sinus, or the non-coronary sinus, from which nothing arises. And this right posterior aortic sinus will bulge into the right atrium to produce what? Torus aorticus. T-O-R-U-S, torus aorticus. A-O-R-T-I-C-U-S. Aorticus, right? And then there is one more thing. What is that called as? The Koch's triangle. K-O-C-H, Koch's triangle. So what is this Koch's triangle? This Koch's triangle is a triangle which is formed by the margin of the atrioventricular valve, and also there is a endocardial ridge which is extending from the atrioventricular valve to the coronary to the inferior vena cava, and also the margin of what? About the coronary sinus. So what are the three boundaries of the Koch triangle? The three boundaries of the Koch triangle are: anteriorly it is bounded by the atrioventricular orifice, and then the other two sides are endocardial ridge which is extending from the atrioventricular orifice to the inferior vena cava, and the another third boundary is the margin of the coronary sinus. So this region is called as what? Koch triangle. So why Koch triangle is important? Because the AV node is present within the Koch triangle. AV node is present within the Koch triangle. So the right atrium, we have discussed about the 3 points, about the external features of the right atrium which carries 5 marks, and about the internal features which can be divided into the anterior wall, the posterior or the anterior rough part or the pectinate part, the posterior smooth part, and the septal wall. In the anterior rough part there is crista terminalis and muscula pectinate. In the posterior smooth part there is opening of superior vena cava, inferior vena cava, and this which is guarded by the eustachian valve, and the coronary sinus which is guarded by the Thebetian valve, and also anterior cardiac veins and the vena cava minima. All this open. And then in the interior there is an atrioventricular orifice which is guarded by 3 valves, that is the tricuspid valve, and the septal valve which has fossa ovalis and limbus fossa ovalis, And also there is a torus aorticus, which is produced by the non-coronary sinus, non-coronary right posterior aortic sinus, and also the Koch's triangle, which is guarded by the atrioventricular margin of atrioventricular valve, and an endocardial ridge which is extending from the atrioventricular valve to the inferior vena cava and the margin of the coronary sinus, and this Koch's triangle lodges AV node. So this is all about what? This is all about the interior of the right atrium. And I told you the third point is what? The third point is the development of the right atrium. So you just remember for time being that the anterior rough part develops from the primitive atrium, the posterior smooth part develops from the sinus venereum, and the fossa ovalis develops from the septum primum, and the limbus fossa ovalis develops from the lower margin of the septum secundum. This you have to by heart it for time being, right? So this is all about the interior of the right atrium and also about the development of the right atrium. Then coming to the left atrium. So here you can see, I don't know to what extent you will understand this diagram. So this is what, this is the atrioventricular orifice, and what is this one? This is the opening of the coronary sinus. This is the opening of the coronary sinus, and here this is the fossa ovalis. Now coming to the, if you see this diagram, what is this one? This is the left atrium, and what is this one? This is the left ventricle. And here you can see the left atrium and the left ventricle is in between the left atrioventricular orifice. What is this one? Left atrioventricular orifice. So this left atrium, this forms the left surface, and also is a part of left margin, also a part of left margin, part of left margin. And then what else it has? It has the anterior, what is this one? The anterior septal part and the posterior, into which 4 pulmonary veins open. So the 4 pulmonary veins opens. These are the pulmonary veins which are coming from the lungs, which are carrying the oxygenated blood from the lungs. These 4 pulmonary veins will be opening into the posterior smooth part of the left atrium. The posterior smooth part of the left atrium, what opens? Those are the 4 pulmonary veins. These are 1, 2, 3, and which is not, the fourth one is not seen. Which is the four pulmonary veins, and these 4 pulmonary veins, the 4 pulmonary veins will be carrying the oxygenated blood from the lungs to the left atrium, from the lungs into the left atrium. And the anterior smooth part, is formed by the septal wall, and in the septal wall, in the right atrium, what we found? We found the fossa ovalis, and also we found the lunate fossa. In the right atrium in the septal wall, what did we find? We found, what is this one? This is the fossa ovalis, and also what is this one? This is the limbus fossa ovalis, and corresponding to the fossa ovalis, in the right atrium, what do you find here? You find the fossa lunata. What it is called as? Fossa lunata. So in the right atrium, we found the fossa ovalis, and corresponding to the fossa ovalis in the left atrium, in the septal wall, which is, what do you find? You find the fossa lunata. So along with what are the veins which are draining? That are the 4 pulmonary veins. And in the septal wall, what do you find? The fossa lunata, which is corresponding to the fossa ovalis of the right atrium. And here you can see, what is this one? The muscula pectinata is only present within the left auricle. So these are the muscula pectinata. The muscula pectinata you have seen in the anterior rough part of the right atrium. But here the comb-like structures or the muscula pectinata the muscula pectinata in the right atrium is on the anterior rough part, Whereas in the left part, it is only confined to the only, what is this one, to the left auricle. So here what are the things? Posterior smooth part into which the 4 pulmonary veins open. Anterior part or the septal part in which the fossa lunata is present and it corresponds to the fossa ovalis. And the auricle, the musculae pectinata are present, which are only confined to the auricle of the left atrium. So, and also other veins which open are the vena cava minimus. So the vena cava minimus will be opening into the right atrium, left atrium, right ventricle and left ventricle, right? So it will be opening into all the 4 chambers, right? So this is the left atrium. And here you can see what are these two. This is the ventricle. This is the ventricles. You can see the 2 valves. This is the atrioventricular orifice, and this is the bicuspid valve. So this is all about the right atrium and the left atrium. In the next class, we will be studying about the right ventricle and the left ventricle. Right? Have you understood the class? Yes. How many of you understood? Any doubts regarding the class? Any doubts regarding, because right atrium usually comes maybe tomorrow, and moreover I have to announce one more thing tomorrow. So please note it down. Where is this one? 1 minute. Tomorrow you will be having an exam during the class hours, that is from 10 to 11, and the syllabus will be only the topics which are confined to the thorax. So the topics which are present in the thorax still today's class, the exam syllabus will be there. That is from the maybe ribs, and there will be how many short note? There will be 4 short notes questions, and each one will be carrying 5 marks. So totally 20 marks, and the time will be 1 hour. That is 10 to 11 a.m. So once you write the examination, you have to submit that paper in PDF format only. So it should be submitted in PDF format only. And one person can send only one scanned copy. You have to scan the paper or scan the copy, and you have to convert that into PDF format, and you have to write your name and the roll number. And also you have to change that. Right, you have to change it. Raju, Aksara, you have to change it, and you have to write your name and roll number also. So tomorrow from 10 to 11 you will be having examination, only 4 marks, that is 5 into 4, 20. And you can submit your copy before 12 o'clock. After 12 o'clock, if you submit your answer paper, it will not be accepted, whatever the reason is, because that is the reason why we are telling you in before only. So see to it, you will be from 10 to 11, you are in a place where you have an internet, proper internet, right? And the thing is, only one person can send only one copy in PDF format. Your names will sir. So what they telling, our staff is telling is, so once you scan the copy, you have to convert it into PDF, and you have to rename the PDF file and you have to write your name and roll number. Write your name and roll number on the PDF file. Both the things, roll number and the name should be, and you have to send to this kimsanatomy2020@gmail.com before 12 o'clock, or before once you complete, you can send it as early as possible. And all these marks will be added for your internal marks. Don't think that we are just telling you something and giving you something. All these, in case if your internal marks are less, then we will consider all the other all the other answer sheets and all your other marks, and see to it that you get good marks if you are getting good marks in this examination, right? So tomorrow, please don't forget, from 10 to 11 you will be having an examination only on thorax until the syllabus which is completed until today. Means right atrium can be added most probably, because it has come many times as an essay question, and draw the diagrams wherever it is necessary. So right atrium can come. What are the and also a typical intercostal now can come as a 5 marks question, and also next muscles of thorax can come as a 5 marks question. All this you see it, and bronchopulmonary segments, which is a very important thing, along with the clinical anatomy can come as a short notes question. So please note it down. All this again I am telling you, your syllabus will be until thorax until today, and it is for 20 marks. You have to write it before 12 o'clock, and you have to scan the copy and change it into PDF format, and then you have to change the PDF name of the PDF format, and you have to write your roll number on the PDF format, and only one person can send only one copy, and you have to send it to this email. Please, I am keeping it. Please note it down once again. All of you have understood who is the CR?
Sir, date of exam, sir.
Date tomorrow. On Saturday, tomorrow. What is the date today?
Yes,
23rd,
sir.
right? Tomorrow, 24th. 24th, 10 to 11. All of you have got my point?
Yes, sir.
Yes? Who is the CR?
Sir, nene, sir.
Divya, right? Bhavana Chandra.
Yes, sir.
Yes. So please note it down, and see to it, all of you attend the examination. In case in your internal marks by mistake, or if something happens, if you are not able to attend it, these marks will be calculated for your internal marks.
Okay, sir.
See to it. All of you have noted down? All of you have noted down? Yes?
Yes, sir.
Please answer. All of you understood the class? Because right atrium can come. Mostly it might come, or it can come as a question tomorrow also. Okay? Have you understood the class?
Yes, sir.
Yes?